Hi everybody, my name is Jessica Holyfield. I'm a professional dancer, professional dance choreographer, and dance educator based out of the southeast of the United States, and we're taking a look at facts and fiction. This is a video called Freestyle in K-pop. So what's really fun about this is I did put a poll out on Patreon to kind of guide me on which ones in particular of this channel I should take a look at, and Facts and Fiction reached out to me themselves, which is really cool, and they're the ones that recommended me take a look at this video, which makes me very excited. So it's really fun to kind of get that sense of collaboration, hopefully of thoughts, and kind of feeding off of each other, hopefully in the sense of certain topics that may be encountered that they mentioned, because I do know that this is one of the few channels, not saying the only, but one that tackles more potentially controversial topics, and I know I have a couple of those on my own channel, so I understand the weight of the responsibility of the verbiage as well as how you choose to justify the particular topic you have. So without further ado, we're gonna go ahead and check this out. Ooh, there are few idols who are really dedicated to freestyle, but there's quite a bit of material to analyze. JJ, former trainee A. Firstly, I'm not sorting idols into these specific freestyles of theirs. Okay, so we're not looking at overall. We're looking at using examples of their own freestyle, exposure, things that are recorded for us to look at. Keep in mind, context of the clips. Variety show, jam, battle, and class. Those are all very different. I agree with that. I'm curious if we get to dive deeper into that topic. Some of the things I say don't apply to freestyle, improv, and other dance genres. Focus on freestyle in the street styles and studio choreo classes where we typically see idols. Okay. All right, the disclaimer. The categories themselves are a bit vague. They're just supposed to help with the structure of the video and show 3 to 4 different contexts of freestyle. I appreciate that. We're demonstrating the kind of scope or perspective that we're taking a look at. J-Hope, what makes freestyle great? It's not a question with a universal answer in any way. It really depends on the era in which you are looking at too, because OG freestyle, like the OG street styles, there was different things in mind. There was different reasoning for battles and and freestyling. It was very different than in today's society of these street styles. So I think context of the era in which you're speaking about too really factors in who you're talking with, because their answer is going to be refined based on their own upbringing within the culture. Misconceptions. What misconceptions do we have? I love having these examples. Hitting every beat is the goal. Really? Not necessarily. Beat killing can be quite overrated, and impressive as it may look, there are other elements to musicality. This I agree with. I wonder if we're going to dive deeper. Beat killing also, I would say it became very trendy. Now, I'm not married to this, but this is something that I've gleaned and noticed over my wide range and exposure to battles, competition, competitive dance structures, regardless if it's a battle, aside for a session, choreography, what have you in the industry. This is something that I've really noticed with beat killing. So, that's the kind of thing that a lot of times you see that sometimes gets used whenever you have dancers who, specifically breakers, honestly, when they do a beat kill, it's they hit a particular part of the musicality of the track that is a bit tricky to find, and they're able to utilize their setup and their overall context of their, let's say, going from their top rocks down into their floor work, into their power moves, and maybe doing a freeze variation or something that shows innovation within the craft, of course, but also showcases the connection between your movement to music. So they demonstrated a beat kill, because also you have to think it is harder to beat kill in choreography. I would just say you demonstrate great musicality or you're captivated. But beat killing was really, I would mostly put that in battles, just for my own personal usage of the term. And you do see people like the Twins, or you see people like that who are known as beat killers, and then I would say there's a couple breakers like B-Boy Jr. He's just very acrobatically captivating, and there's certain things that he can bring and utilize that can just showcase that fluency of understanding how to hear your music in the moment too. So I'm curious how we're gonna dive into this here. There's other elements to musicality, yes. Musicality is such a broad term that can be articulated, but a lot of people don't talk about it enough. Okay. So this is melody, texture, grooving to the rhythm, subverting the expectations by only hitting certain sounds in the music can be way more interesting and subtle. This I can understand too. You want to also create digestibility and breathability within your movement. You don't want it to always be hitting the predictable layers of your track. So even with musicality, it's more so divided depending on if you're looking at it from a musician standpoint or a dancer standpoint. And I know here the context is dancer. So melody, yes. So like writing the overall, like what is the dominant layer that is presented? Texture. Also in music, that's called timbre. Timbre in music is texture to dancers. But remember, timbre is sound context, so it's and you can also split it up and go even further to even call it tonal color. That's another version of it, but that's differentiation between your instrumentation, which is great. And so texture to dancers, I have been saying, is more cultural to the dancer because it's the context of how you want something to feel with somebody's eyes. And because texture and dynamics kind of go hand in hand. Dynamics is more of a universal usage of highs, lows, ebb, flows, time, space. A lot of the Laban methods is kind of what I go off of that is taught normally in modern. But I think that's how you can differentiate texture and dynamics, because some people get those confused. They are very, very close in nature, but they are different, especially in music. And so I've been trying to, as I've been studying music cognition and music psychology with the scientific neuroscience behind it as well, very much a baby in that field. So please don't quote me on that. I do continue to pay money to people to help me learn more besides just the Google search. So I'm still learning and growing there, but it's really helped me understand musicality more, and it's helped me be a better teacher of it and a better demonstrator of justifying it in my own art through dance, you know? So texture, that's kind of like, I'm kind of adding on to what they're using. Subverting the expectations by only hitting certain sounds in the music can be way more interesting and subtle. I can agree with that. Yeah. The dancer has to or shouldn't know the music. In a battle, it can always happen. One knows it and one doesn't. There's no way in preventing it. And sometimes battles are known for remixing tracks to where a dancer's not really going to know it. So you have a more even playing field. But most of the time, like with Red Bull, you're going to get it's just like typical kind of tracks that you can hear in regular pop music, but like Western, like the westernized music charts is what you end up seeing a lot of times there, but sometimes not really the case. And I think that's fine. There's no way preventing it. Freestyle is natural. It's only about talent and practice. Technique. Basics from one or multiple styles and concepts such as tracing can be extremely useful tools for freestyle. Yes, so a lot of times people discredit technique. Now, when it comes to the inception of the styles, there really wasn't this technique wheelhouse. Does that make sense? In the inception, it was more social. You organically picked up on the information, and then over time, over the generations, they refined it to make it more, I would say, Mr. Wiggles, his VHSs is one of those revolutionary ways of showcasing technique for a lot of movement. He converted information and made it applicable or made it eligible for so many other people. Like they were able to get it out there, and that's why hip hop's been alive and thriving. It's because of people like Mr. Wiggles who would take these things that normally weren't taught, and you just kind of picked up on it, or you learned under somebody, like a discipleship, mentorship kind of thing. Apprenticeship, right? But he took it and he put it in a very practical way to bring it to the masses, and I absolutely love that. Freestyle is natural. It's only about talent and practice. I don't 100% agree with that. I will say part of it may stem from how you're nurtured in the dance scene, because a lot of studio dancers struggle to freestyle or improv authentically because they're always told what to do. Very rarely are they understand the concepts of exploration of movement unless you have a really good teacher. I would say those teachers are not as present in the spaces, at least in like general America. I can only speak on the studio scene in America, but that's something that you don't see as much. It's more of a rarity. And so I feel that I just see more times than not, especially in the convention sense in the Western side, you really see there's like, it's really more so focused about tricks, and they don't know how to just be in the music. And that's something that is the hardest. It's still something really hard for me to work through with waving, because it's such an exploration of movement and figuring out, okay, I'm going to stay here. How am I going to enhance what I have? I can drop it down, bringing it through, maintain flow, but also have a sense of individuality in my choices. And that's something that I had to die to myself a lot and completely tear down the old methodology that I had built for myself from my training in the studio. So that right there, it's, if anything, it can be the most unnatural thing in the world, learning how to freestyle. It just depends on your context. Technique, basics from wonder, multiple styles and concepts such as tracing. Tracing is the idea that like I can do a wave, but tracing, it looks like, you know, when you trace on paper, something that kind of exists, it enhances or it brings in an extra sense of, it helps create a focal point of where you want somebody to look. That's really what traces are used for. I use it a ton in waving, but you do see it a lot to help initiate threads, which is like when you have a space and you have people kind of create energy through pockets that you create with your body. So that's really cool. And they're absolutely right. You can definitely utilize that in your freestyle. Of course, your freestylers who don't want to learn any dance foundations and want to completely do their own thing, that can be great too, but isn't what we will look at in this video. That I understand too. And that's a really slippery slope too if you don't yeah, that's like a completely separate topic. So I'm glad that we're not really bringing that into this, because it's so different than what the context of this freestyle and K-pop. Now we will look at different categories of freestyle. The first one is I would label typical choreo dancer freestyle. Here we go. Okay. If you attend a choreo class, you might see that some dancers or students freestyle before and after the choreo. Leah Kim and Joe Kwan. Joe Kwan, I saw him. He was featured on Lachika's Man of Woman, right? That one. And then Leah Kim, of course. I knew her way before Street Woman Fighter, so it's cool because of her studio. Those freestyles often consist of familiar, style-appropriate moves executed in a technical manner and on strong accents of the music without much experiment or risk. I would say normally, but sometimes depending on how acquainted you are with the track and how acquainted you are with the fingerprints of the choreography that your choreographer or the teacher gives, you may feel more comfortable taking risks, especially if that's something that is a part of your growth as a dancer in class, because as I've seen that sometimes too. Choreo, Sung Han Bin. Very nice. Having their own little moment, freestyle. A lot of times people go off of the choreographer's choices and they kind of mesh it with what they're comfortable with. If it's well with the choreo, you might not realize it's freestyle if you don't see the other dancers. Yeah, that's also true. Also, sometimes choreographers do a good job of guiding their dancers if they want them to really explore a certain layer of the track, which is good. But I'm going to say this real quick. I don't know if they're going to mention it, but I'm going to say it now. And I'm just curious if this is going to be brought up. But sometimes that can be... freestyle in the classroom can be more restrictive than freestyle like at a cypher or a session, because you are, a lot of times you're not really allowing yourself true exploration because you're trying to either, confide. It's like when you compromise. Yeah, you compromise individuality sometimes for the sake of looking cohesive with those around you. That's something that you get just from the natural peer pressure of being in class, especially if you don't have a sense of your own artistry. And that goes into honestly the topic of synchronicity versus individuality. There is a way for both to exist, but because so many people focus on the synchronicity, they neglect what it means to actually have your own sense of artistry and presence. And a lot of people are more so like bandwagoners in regards to choreography and what they like. And I'm not saying all, but I'm diving into a completely separate topic, but it does go hand in hand with the freestyle and how you see it in class. It can come across very restrictive if you're not careful. There are opportunities to grow, but if you notice that everybody's trying to hit certain parts of the music and not stand out, or like stand out by doing or by hitting the music the way the choreographer hits it versus trying to see how they would want to hit it while making sure they understand the style context of the choreography while maintaining the integrity of it. It's a very tricky thing that takes a lifelong amount of experience to feel comfortable in. Take a look at Momo's freestyles and variety shows. They are rather simple, but the moves are well executed. Yeah. If it really is freestyle and not so short, it's structured like a choreo. Yeah. After the beginning, Momo stands there waiting and brushing her hair. Freestyling would use the calm moments of the music just as well, which is true. Also, with variety shows, they kind of give off the energy of when somebody at like the party, like at a party or at a family gathering, they're like, oh my gosh, you're a dancer, show me something. That's what that gives off, you know? It's just kind of more so like a courteous thing, more so than like actual exploration and growth in the freestyle realm. You know, so I think that's what it's giving for me on variety shows. You know, for me, this is a Meemaw asked what I was working on as a dancer, you know. But outside the studio, this type of freestyle can be less suited. Yeah, I can understand that too. Her hit the stage battle with Chungha actually looks improvised. She does a series of simple moves. I need to watch more hit the stage. I saw some stuff. Analyzing Chungha's response in the whacking section. But they cut like 12 times so you can actually see the whole thing. Most choreo dancers who don't actively practice freestyle fall into their habits and just do some of their favorite moves. Yes, I talked about that. And you can totally tell whenever they start repeating certain grooves or their reset is very like, you can tell based on their natural, like how they hold themselves or how they reset to get into freestyles. It's just transitions. They cut off their flow. That's a big thing. I completely agree with that. The context of this type of freestyle is to stage camera dancing for someone rather than with someone. The next category, Nmix Lily. The next category is the other way around. Party dances are meant to be danced together with each other and everyone can join in. Yeah. Most styles started in a social concept, like spaces, social spaces, house, whacking, you know, hip hop, Running Man, Alf, Smurf originated as social party dances. There wasn't much structure or complexity that points for everybody to dance together. Yeah, absolutely. I would say Afro. I'd put Afro in that too. Taeyong, yeah, fun. See, yeah, look at that. Everybody just wants to vibe together. It's a really great way to set up your it just sets up vibes. It's just great. Stray Kids Felix. Okay. I will say he noticed. I'm about to analyze this. You notice how that's Felix, right? He's talking about Felix. Notice how he does have a pretty good like basic like back rock. A lot of times breakers use that, but notice how restricted he is right here in his body. It feels very disconnected. So you notice he has a lot of legato attempts right here at the upper body, but it feels very disconnected from the lower half, and it's because we're not seeing a connection or any clean transition that's taking place right here in the second, like the bottom part of the torso. Yeah. That's what happens though when you do really clean choreo. Texture goes out the window, and so what happens is just confession time. Whenever you clean competition routines, so for me, I clean a lot of studio competition routines, and they compete on convention circuits like the 24/7s, the Revive, Revel, Jump, like that kind of stuff. Now, some of the studios I'm with compete on different circuits, but similar vein, if that makes sense, right? So, but what happens is when you clean choreography, what's naturally going to happen is the things that are not implicit on the dancer's body, it's going to go bye-bye because you're thinking about the lines and overall extremities and making sure they're all in check. What I have to do is a lot of times reset their texture and their groove back in after we clean the movement, because I have to tell them the spiel every year, because remember, they're kids, they're growing. And they mostly work with under 18. And they're in like some of them are like elite level pre-professional, but none of them are active professionals, and I'm totally okay with that. But we have to go through and reinsert a lot of the authenticity behind the movements, and we had to have this history reminder of like why it's not correct if you're not doing the groove with it, you're just doing the movement, and it's not an authentic representation of your training as well as the piece that you're trying to exude. So that's something that that's what happens there. Like that's just what I noticed with Felix, and you probably see it a lot in K-pop too. They may eliminate some textures in some of their work for the sake of refinement, and that's where you get that topic of the more in sync something is, the less textured it is. It's all in how you clean it. It really is. Point is to have fun. Chungha, that's funny. Having fun. But this looks different. In the street dance community, a more complex way of freestyle evolved. There's more rock and bounce present. What they practice, what do they practice? Which techniques do they use? How do they get so many ideas? Field dog. That's a really tricky thing. I've had to answer this question for myself, which is why I'm going to answer it now, but there's a chance that they may answer that too. And I love that. This is from personal experience as somebody who comes from a studio background, a heavy studio background, and I still actively work in the studio. That is the majority of what my time is I am contracted out to studios to teach and to clean and to choreograph and things of the like. What do they practice? Which techniques do they use? So for me, it's part of it is a sense of identity. What are some things that you are drawn to as a dancer? For me, it's the music. I love and care and tend to music, and I try to steward it well. Sometimes it'll bite me in the butt when I try to really dive into musicality a little too heavily and not really allow myself to just exist in and grow in the movement itself, because sometimes I try to connect it too prematurely and I can end up overkilling it or trying to do beat kills. Does that make sense? In my own waving way. And so I have to always practice patience and flow and allowing myself to figure out an idea and stay there longer than I want. So it's learning to compromise or figure out what are aspects of freestyle that are what tailors to your identity as an artist, because that's something that even to this day, being very real as a freestyle, like in the freestyle context, that's still really hard for me to answer. But as a choreographer, there's certain instances, fingerprints, movement qualities, things of the like that I feel more drawn to steward and to be passionate about. But in freestyle, all I know is I love waving, and I love other styles too, but waving feels like the safest home for me. Just as an explorer, because I compete in every other facet of my life and I adjudicate every other facet of my life except for freestyle for me. And that's why I try not to enter into battles anymore, because it's still a very intimate place for me, and I don't want to put that up to be viewed at for adjudication, if that makes sense. But that's how I would answer that question. I've also asked this question to others who I've been really captivated by their movement quality in freestyle. And some of the answers have been like, because I've asked me like, what is one thing that you feel like is a fingerprint of your overall aesthetic as a mover? And one of them is like their ability to storytell. So they feel very familiar with creating imagery through movement. And a lot of story, you can tell, just like with rappers, you have like the lyricists and then you have the mumble rappers and those, those types are the MCs and stuff. In dance and in freestyle, it's similar. Some really cater towards technique and building and the geometry side of stuff. That can be either tutting or waving or popping, right? There's the fundamentalists, so the ones who are really tailored to the OG aesthetic. And then some are more of the storytellers, so they're able to tell their story and be able to replicate it well while representing an authentic pocket. So that's like my personal experience of who I've talked with and what I've personally experienced in real time, how I would answer that question. Note that these are not ranked in any way. The order is just random or help explain different aspects. Great. Young's freestyles are very footwork focused. A little bit of twist of flex. She understands the rhythmic pattern of the music and matches the impact of her steps accordingly. Even though she anticipates a change in the music, she doesn't stand there waiting for it like Momo did in an earlier example. Yep, nice. There's also a structure to her round. Chill grooving. She's allowing her body to sink into it, understand the track, and not try to push too much into it. Taking more risk than her energy. Breaking footwork in the end. Yeah, I would call that more floor work than footwork, because she kind of dropped. Did a little, kind of like, right here. Swiping, so she brought it down to more of a hook and then turned out of it. That was nice. That was a nice variation. I enjoyed that. That looked like a prelim round, not gonna lie. I think that was a preliminary, because a lot of times you have people lined up and then they all present as judges depending on how many people are signed up and everything, but that was nice. Harry June's round and Be Ambitious. I've not seen Be Ambitious, but I feel like I need to watch. I feel like my time's gonna come to watch the show. He does basic hip-hop steps such as the crisscross, but he also, do you notice, it's polyrhythmic. I wonder if they're gonna talk about that. Here's another thing. With hip-hop, it is explained, and there's a book. There's a book that if you are a teacher, like a dance teacher of any kind, especially in street styles, get this book. Monsell Durden, he's a professor at the University of Southern California. Pivotal, amazing information that he has and he's compiled and everything. There's a book called Beginner Hip-Hop. Absolutely love it. I haven't even gotten through all of it because there's just so much to glean and so much to apply. For me, one aspect of it is hip hop is polyrhythmic. And that's why a lot of it looks so difficult and it's really hard to replicate if that's not an implicit thing in your movement quality. In ballet, it is very different than in hip hop. Even though it can be polyrhythmic to a certain degree, it's a very different posture and way of execution. So when you think about just the overall, it's just very polyrhythmic. And that's what you were seeing here. Harry Junes, notice not only was he doing a crisscross, he was doing more like a Harlem Shake, kind of variant at the top, polyrhythmic. There's two things happening at the same time. Riding multiple layers of the track. That's what makes it feel more full in energy. Right there. That was nice. Waving it down, bring it up, a little bit of tracing. He could work on some refinement on connecting between all of them. Tracing means to trace one hand across the body or alongside the other arm. So I did kind of elaborate on that. So that's definitely a great start to the example. But tracing is just the in general of using an arm. You can use your leg to trace. You can use your head to trace. That's something I've learned. You can use wind to create, like you use gears. It doesn't have to be like so stagnant. There's many different ways you can execute. It's part of your storytelling or your way of executing it to your music. So tracing, like I've already said, it really helps create focal points where you want it to go. It helps guide your viewer to help see the energy transitions with what you're doing. I love tracing. Tracing's great. I put it in everything. It's often done in combination with waving to follow the pattern of the wave. Yes. Now, as a waver, I feel like it's a courtesy to actually talk about what he's doing. So he's doing an entrance wave. Notice where he's looking. It's important. Then what he decides to do is he goes in and then he brings it around to bring it back out. Totally fine. Brings it through. And then what happens is he catches it. He takes this trace and then he catches it to set up a wave on the other side. He actually turns it into more of a fixed point, brings it in. He just kind of threw the wave away there, I will say. And then he decided to make another connection. That's something that you want to avoid. If you throw the wave away, especially if you're going into an entrance, it needs to go somewhere. If it was an exit, like how he brought it in and then he hit it and then went back out, he could have just left it. He didn't need to catch it again and then just drop it. Does that make sense? And then from here, he goes and he starts it back up and drops it back down. Now I gotta like actually make sure that I'm seeing this. Yeah, so waves it in, brings it out. Yeah, so I see what he was trying to do. He brings it in and then he brings it down to trace it out. I understand that, but you have to be mindful of how you're going to choose the fixed point or showcase. He wasn't very clear on showcasing that he was holding the wave there to bring it where he needed to go and then to bring it back out. You want to make it digestible and clear. So that would be my overall note there. Now we're going to see it slow down. I just want to make sure that what I saw. Wave, bring it up, through, he catches it. Oh yeah, so he catches it and then he folds it in. So for me, he would need to, because it stopped at the elbow, move the elbow. That would have been my note to him there. Waving it through, then he threw it up. Harry June has a few moves down that can work as blow-ups. Yep, that was nice. With a what is it? Kick. What's it called? Alpha kick, right? Alpha kick with a nice little hip rotation. That was cool. That was nice. You see that kind of, that hinge motion that he did, that levitated with the wave. So it's all of these are just showcasing polyrhythmic intentions with some of these moves. They're collaborative and they showcase, that was nice. Right there, swiping it through. It was a bit messy on the come up, but I really liked how he got down. It's very sporadic and very quick. So that was fun. Overall, I think that the battle and the end just didn't showcase all of Harry June's strengths, which can have a lot of reasons. Nervous, bad day. Yeah, I hope that he can show more of his potential outside of choreo in the future. Yeah, I think I totally agree with that. One battle does not depict an overall like identity of a mover. And that's my thing, is like if you're going to study somebody or if you're going to make a decision or if you're going to have feelings about one particular mover, you need to have, and I hold this myself to this standard too, I have to understand if I'm just looking at one, if I'm just looking at one battle with somebody, I have to assume that this could be a good day, bad day, whatever, and I'm still going to give pointers regardless if it was a good or bad day, but I'm not going to sit here and assume that they suck or this is as good as they're going to get. That's doing that person a disservice, because I don't know the grunt work or the grit or the perseverance and the work ethic that they have outside of this 1-2 minute perspective. Just like for me, I would always hope if somebody does have a disagreement with me, because I have to take responsibility for the words that I say, or there's no reason for me to be doing this, because I would be doing people a disservice, but just lying to people's faces, you know? So I believe the words that I say, but I am also open-minded to learning new things and refining my insight so I can actually be a more positive influence on a lot of these aspects, like in their case too. I just feel that, in general, I always hope that when somebody has a disagreement with me, that they look at more of a context of where I'm coming from versus just this 1-2 minute spiel of an overall reaction to one battle where I've already seen 15 other battles with that person, or I've already seen the show structure and you're only seeing a glimpse when there's 70 other reactions that have already taken place, you know, because I've had people like that. And of course we've had discussions about it, and I'm always appreciative of the contribution in that way. I don't shy away from tough conversations. No point in me doing this if I can't actually defend or submit and learn something new, you know? So I agree with that. Some people just don't have a good day, and that's fine. You can look for a theme in a freestyle, yeah? Minzy first does them without moving the rest of the body, and then connects them to other steps. Minzy, my girl! She's always utilized her chest a lot. That was like a fingerprint of hers. I always loved seeing her do that. Freestyle incorporates female hip-hop steps sometimes, a term that not everybody agrees on though. I think, yeah, James has a different theme for each of the 2 rounds. That's another thing, it's creative stamina. That's for longevity of multiple rounds, and I've talked about that. Yeah. That was a fun moment. Boom. Demonstrates his understanding of the song, which is nice. You also have to be careful, as somebody who understands a lot of music, you have to be careful. You can't let the song dictate your movement and let it, let me rephrase that. You wanna be mindful that you don't want the song to be the key factor in determining what you do, 150,000%. Because for me, a lot of times there's so many layers, excuse me, there's so many layers, but a lot of times there's, I want to hit all of them within the given time that I'm given, and that's just not practical, nor is that a healthy way to help somebody digest the track, you know? And so I have to learn to not always try to take a beat kill approach, but take a observational approach and allow the movement to just flow within the track. But it also goes from what style you're trying to do too. So with beat killing, you have to showcase the balance. You have to create moments of breathability. Second round focuses on more groovy hip-hop foundations mixed with a party TikTok move, some more viral. Ooh, hot take. Do you feel that TikTok, a lot of moves that stem from TikTok, are a sense of they're a degree of party moves of the generation in which they stem from? That's a very interesting topic that we could talk about. Now, would I equate it to a street style? No. I do think that there's a lot of movements that are influenced in TikTok. They do have a street style background about them that a lot of people don't know about. I would say like the City Rock. A lot of people don't know that was like City Boy, I think it was like City Boy Rio. My guy there. Like that, there's a name to it and it comes from somewhere. Like it's not just a move that somebody made up one day randomly. You know, like the sneeze. It comes from Chonky, I think, right? Yeah. So it's just, and then the Gangsta Walk comes from I think Zaya, Z-A-Y, from Future Kings. I know where he came from, right? So it's like learning, it's learning that a lot of these very viral moves, oh, the slick back. Slick back's not called the slip back, it's called the Juby slide. It's a variation of the Juby slide. The reason why it's called a slip back is because of the song and the challenge. But it's not called a slick back, it's called a Juby slide because that was who made it exceptionally viral the year prior. So that's a fun little fact. There's like little things like that. That I feel that when we use the term like TikTok or viral moves, and I'm not talking about in this context, I'm just saying in general, when we use that, I mean, yes, they can kind of stem from its own realm or world of virality, but they do come from somewhere, but there's just a common place where they're practiced. That's the kicker. And that's why for me, there's so much you can learn from TikTok, but there's a lot of stuff you can choose to be ignorant about on TikTok too. Making it entertaining, intentionally funny, note the facial expressions. Yeah, that's fun. He does have great connection between his movements. It's fun. 10, NCT. This freestyle is not necessarily entirely hip-hop, but could be considered under the category still. If you think about it, it's more so his dynamics and texture, and also depends on the track that he's on. But if you look at the fundamentals, like in isolation, yeah. He's doing breaking, but he's matching the overall texture and dynamics to that of contemporary. That's just based on what I gleaned from that. He smoothly connects different steps that emphasize different parts of the music. I can't play the song, so I encourage you to watch the original video below. I may after this, that'd be cool. Groove to follow the vibe of the music. Fun. I will say as a side note with 10, I've learned choreography from 10, and it was like there's so much waving in it. That's why I learned it, and it's actually on my channel. You can see if you can find it. but yeah, it's a whole vibe and a half. I loved it. I was so freaking tired after it too because it's a lot of technique demanded of you. He also plays around with different textures. For example, the isolations transitioning over into the melting. That was nice. I love that. Nice little, probably attempted wordplay. I like the freestyle because 10 just seems to have fun and make some less conventional choices compared to most idols' freestyles. And I can agree with that too, but it also goes back to, I really feel like he had more, there's a chance he may be more comfortable. That's another factor too. And I'm trying to get my thoughts together for that. He makes less conventional choices. I have a feeling he has a better understanding of how he wants to move as an artist. And that goes back to my very main point that you would be surprised at how many people don't have a sense of guidance or understanding when they freestyle. Most have it in choreography if they're a choreographer, but even then sometimes, especially if they're trained under somebody, they may struggle or they have to go through that process of not getting imposter syndrome, you know, whenever you like something from somebody. Sometimes you don't want to create this choreographic incest situation that there's a lot in LA that's happening a lot. Like, we're just going to call it what it is. I'm not saying everybody, but there's a lot that's going on there. It's just an incest of choreography and people aren't thinking for themselves, you know? And that just, freestyle, it works the same way. It's just with a different circuit and different people, you know? And I would say here in this way too, he sticks out because it looks like he's comfortable just in himself as an artist, and you can tell that here. And I love that. Love that. Chungha, while most of the material I've seen of Chungha freestyling is on the less serious side as intended for variety shows, her skills still shine through. It is fun to see. But notice she doesn't really have a huge sense of connection between her focal pointed movement. And that's another indicator of, you can tell if somebody caters more towards the choreography toolkit or a freestyle toolkit. I've mentioned that a lot in the Street Fighter series or when I watch battles. Her technique and attitude make her whacking background immediately noticeable. Yeah? Your pose and posture and how you present yourself does carry a lot of weight in that. She does variations instead of just going through the basics of the style, which I always love to see. I feel like I've seen this excerpt before. That's fun. She just immediately just goes off and they're like, you're kidding me. That's fun. That's super vibey. Love it. Grooving it out. She's not just doing whacking. She's trying to just vibe with the track. Hit the stage. She goes against Momo, dancing to the same song. Womanizer woman. Poses are an important part of whacking, but there aren't rules for the type of poses. They don't have to be held for long. They can flow into one another and so on. That's true. I would say, like, yeah, it's important in whacking. I would say it's also pretty important in Vogue, too. Which is why people get confused or combine the styles. They are very different, but they are very similar. Oh, hold on. I missed that. There's a lot of inspiration from acting and movies. Drama and storytelling can be just as important as technique. Yes. Fun fact, if you didn't know this, I know this was talked about in another video of Facts and Fiction, but whacking used to be called punking. And the reason why it was called punking is I heard this from Victor Manuel himself. The man himself. He is one of the last original punkers in the world. Hearing this straight from his mouth, he says, you know, with punking, it was used as a, calling it punking, it used to be a huge, like an awful derogatory word used for minority LGBT men. And they used the word, they took it and they used it as a sense of, oh my gosh, words. They just used it and they said, suck it, you know, like they basically were like, you know what, we'll take this word and we're going to have power over it. It's kind of pretty much what ended up happening with it. And then we turned it, and then it turned over into whacking, because punking almost died out because of the, I think it was the AIDS epidemic that happened. So punking almost died out, but then, you know, we see it alive and thriving as whacking. Oh, I missed that last thing. See how Jungkook combines posing and gestures with other whacking basics. I'm ready to see it. Let's see it. Setting it up, super fun. And the energy, she's very familiar with the track, so she's able to kind of placate it to more her own aesthetic, which I really like. Yeah, notice she is focusing a little bit more on the upper body versus the lower half of the body. And she really tries to keep in that more like second position where she kind of drops down. So you can kind of tell that she's focusing more on that upper body, as we have not enough material as far as I know. I can't really estimate her overall abilities, but her habits are very typical for a whacker. She also shows a lot of confidence and creativity. I would say she doesn't work on her lower body in collaboration with whacking as much as I feel like could be beneficial for her in these contexts. One thing that makes whacking difficult is the coordination that is required. Yes, it is polyrhythmic. Most, if not all, these styles are polyrhythmic in nature when you do them authentically and well, especially if you do above the fundamental requirement. Often each arm will do something different. Yes, in a different tempo and texture. Boom, polyrhythm. Can you see Hanbin's right arm doing overheads in double time? Boom, slow down. God, I love this. I would say Waxy actually does a lot of ticking with the overheads. And she uses it to help boom, 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 boom. Trace it down. I love it. Yes to that. Additionally, coordinating that with footwork can also be tricky, whether in choreo or freestyle. I was just talking about that. Yep, and that's what makes it really helpful, is you want it to complement but also showcase variety. Now also remember that whacking has up groove, which can be expressed with the upper body. Up grooves and down grooves. A little different. It also has to do with the context of the track that you're on. That's why the BPM, the tempo, the overall timbres and aesthetics of a whacking track will be different than other styles, but some of the funk tracks can overlap and touch on multiple styles depending on the track. There's also a moment of musicality in this round that might be less obvious to people who aren't familiar with battles. Let me see. Are you going to tell me? Tell me. Did you see him gesturing towards his ear? This is a sign for musicality, usually made to criticize the opponent, but he does it in the moment where the lyrics say music. Basically, it's like, hey, are you listening? Listen to your music. Yeah, that's one of those. You see Wolflow do it, you've seen Olchan do it. If you've seen the Street Fighter series, you've seen at least one battler do it. Yeah, basically like, I know this track, you need to get on the same page. This is how you do it. It's one of those like, it's a sense of confidence, a little bit of a diss too. You see, honestly, I see Olchan, he's like the biggest person who does that. In the Street Fighter series, I don't know. He's like boom, 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 right before Mr. Spotify. Popping is more of an umbrella term for multiple styles. Now, let me say something about this, because I would define popping more like this, but I've heard from Pop and Pete himself. He says that the only thing that is popping is the pop. But for me, and he says, oh, it's, you know, we know it's like an umbrella term, but no, popping is a pop. And for me, it's because a lot of the other dynamics or other elements of what makes up popping, like the umbrella term in multiple styles, waving has its own community. Tutting has its own community now. They used to be used to help create dynamics within your pops, right? You wave into a pop, it creates breathability and a sense of, you know, a heartbeat in your dance. But nowadays, because of just the generations that have done a good job of growing and exploring and projecting the styles out, and others who are taking on the pioneer role and key figure role to be able to innovate and refine, just like Wiggles with VHS tapes, right? Popping, whenever I hear popping, it's gonna be your pop's gonna be the most defined. That's like, that needs to be your focal point. But it's, you can use waving, you can use tutting, you can use strutting, you can use glides, scarecrow, puppeting. There's so many different things. Robot, but then robot, there's a whole animation championship that happens in LA, you know, and that, Yaya puts on. So it's nowadays, it makes more sense for popping to just be popping. But back in the day, I think it would have been more effective to kind of put it as an umbrella term, because so many people use so many different dynamics to help with their pops. But I would say waving, I can do waving with popping accents in it. but waving would be my primarily style I would want to justify, you know? But I would say that is a term that is used, but I also have heard OGs say that that's not an appropriate way to define popping. But for me, because I teach, it's actually with popping, if you do use this term, it is easier to teach people that there is so much more than just the pop. And it's a really nice introduction to get people into waving, into tutting, into all the other things. So popping's more of a texture style versus a movement style. And I'm going to talk about that later. Like poppers, Eugene combines multiple of them. Yeah, they're about to get into that, I think. Yeah, isolations, knee and head rolls are usually seen in electric boogaloo. Yeah, which is nice. Love that. While effects, like these, are not part of boogaloo foundation. Tutting. Yeah. Particularly good at waving. He is very good. That was actually a great connection. Mainly have a boogaloo foundation. Love that. Fun. Oh, and there's a little bit of Copra in there too. A highlight for me is how she intentionally expects to start with waving, but when she hears the hip-hop music, she starts with hip-hop steps instead. Ah. Different popping techniques and movement qualities fit different types of music. Jimin, BTS, a more funky vibe. It's like James Brown. I don't know it's not James Brown, but yeah, leaning to a more animation style. So like I said, more robot. Yeah, of course, two dancers can have entirely different interpretations of the same music. Yes. How are battles decided? I don't know, you tell me. Ultimately, it's a subjective opinion of the judges, and when it's a close battle, many naturally disagree with the result. Let me also throw in here the politics of somebody's investment in the community, because this happened at Waves Within, because I was one of the organizers for the event for LA. It was the first, at least in America, it was one of the first like waving championships for the world, like the world came. Now that they're not the first, but there was like, it was a really important time and an event that happened this year. Now, there was a battle. It was like a top 16 or top 8. It was between Boogie Frantic and EOS. EOS, I think, is from, is he from Germany? I think Germany. And EOS ended up taking second, but it was a top 16. And Boogie Frantic, if you know who Boogie Frantic is, or if you've been to a battle, or if you understand popping or anything like that, you know who Boogie Frantic is. He is one of those second, like he's up there. He's one of those low-key OG kind of tiered individuals when it comes to influence and just investment in the community and his overall competency of the craft. That's like a huge. He's one of the best. He lost that battle to EOS in the waving in a waving match, and it was like top 16, I think. And normally he's like a top 4 cat, you know. And a lot of people were not fans of that because a lot of them we're like, yo, how could Boogie Frantic lose to this nobody or to this no one? Now, for me, it goes back to, I ended up asking Boogie Frantic this question. I said, how do you feel is important whenever you have, when you have people who have an old school perspective and then you have a new school perspective and you're dancing to a new school track, how can we properly respect the old school fundamentals while also allowing innovation for the new school perspective? And he answered it very well. He's like, both sides have to be receptive to absorb, learn, and grow. Absolutely. Great. So I will say you're going to get subjectiveness in any adjudication process when you involve humans. It's unavoidable. Now, there are ways and methods in order for there to be some sense of objectivity. And that comes from, are you listening to your music? If there's somebody who is not listening to their music at all and somebody who is, that is a very basic adjudication to measure. Like there's measurable things. Now when you get to the high caliber ones, it's really tricky because you have to be very familiar with the craft in order to know the true depiction and context of what was deemed more difficult or who did what better, and it also can come from the preference of the day. If for me, if I was very exposed or saturated in a particular element for a while, I may be naturally more inclined to catch it in real time when I adjudicate something. That's life. I'm a human, you know? So I wouldn't say it's exclusively subjective. There are objective elements about judging, or there's no point in judges, you know? But I will say though, you cannot avoid disagreements, you know, because that's life, even in the choreographic realm. And that's where justification or understanding what you're watching and being able to articulate it comes in handy. Sometimes it's obvious though, and almost anyone would agree. Yeah. The battle between Nose and Lip J from his Street Woman Fighter concert was clearly just for fun. Still, I want to point out some aspects that make this obvious. Nose has 2 more moves that she repeats a lot. Yeah. The shampoos. In my opinion, it's more appropriate for the end of the class freestyle after choreo I talked about in the beginning. And then I already kind of mentioned about my own personal thoughts about that. While her technique is good, there's not much you can say about aspects like structure, musicality, creativity, storytelling, and so on. I would also throw in, structure, go into structure, levels, you know, dynamics, creativity and storytelling. I would kind of put them together, you know, but also you could think creativity is more the innovation of the craft, how you make it your own artistic expression without compromising the basic foundations of it. Again, this battle is not serious, but shows the difference between primarily choreo and freestyle. Yeah. Yeah. Not just dancing to the lyrics, so she's... Look at the smooth transition between reacting to the instrumental to the vocals. That's something that... That's a really big thing that you're going to notice with freestylers is they understand the toolkit of switching between the levels. With choreographers, they're able to plan, right? They're able to plan out a more analytical approach to hitting the different levels and layers. So we're not used to having to impromptu make those choices. Freestylers, that's something that you train to do. You train your brain to learn what to listen for and how to transition your techniques. That's also, the more you train polyrhythmically, the better you're going to be able to catch and justify multiple layers that are happening in your track more often. So that's another thing. Freestylers practice different ways to get into and out of the floor work, for example. Yep, that's a good point. That allows them to be creative and risky without fearing of getting stuck in an awkward position. Also, train awkward positions. Don't just train things that are comfortable. Train, literally, tell yourself, try to be as awkward as possible. How far can I take this? You literally have to allow yourself to be uncomfortable in order to figure out and unlock new ways to turn those discomforts into comforts. But a lot of people aren't comfortable enough to do that. I'm one of those people that took me a long time to even get to a starting place with that. There was an infamous battle in SMF. What is this? Ochan and Tricks? Ochan is known for his amazing musicality. No, it's Hyunsei! I just did an analysis on this. I'm curious what they're about to say about this. But I want to talk about another aspect. How does a dancer create a personal style? One possibility is to subvert the expectations to add your own twist to a well-known move. But let me ask this question though. This is something that these are really, it's really good to have this viewpoint, but also what I've learned by saying these things to students or by being on the empathetic end or the receiving end of somebody telling me this, my next question would be, how do I do that? You know, because a lot of times when you grow up in the studio, and this is really, I'm really talking more so about studio trained dancers, whenever you train in that way, it is really hard to be able to add your own twist to something when the majority of your time and stint in your dance career has been you are told what to do and you're not given the environment to add your own twist to stuff. You have to learn to compromise. You have to learn to comply, especially when you operate in groups because of the synchronicity. You want to look clean with other people and you all train under similar people. And also this goes back to, there's not a lot, you do have studios that have dancers and teachers, specifically teachers who know how to teach freestyle or teach improv. But that is not as frequent as you think it is. And that's why we have the choreographic and freestyle incest of the dance industry that we do, especially in the studio convention world. I have touched on this. I've never done a deep dive on it because I live it. So I see it. every January through May. I experience it when I go to multiple conventions, and maybe I'll take you guys along the ride on one or two of them. I think my kids would enjoy that too. Who knows? But anyway, but just going back to possibility, subvert the expectations. It's you're in your own way, but a lot of times you don't realize you're in your own way, and that's the beauty and power of having people in your life. It really is. You know, the more you have people there, the better and healthier it's going to be for you to be able to realize the unhealthy or the healthy traits of your training, or you as a person, or your processing in general. You probably know the Harlem Shake. Dancer link. Yep. Yes, sir. Ochan starts doing the move, but instead of finishing it, he uses the arm position to do something unexpected. I touched on this exact thing in the analysis. He did a Harlem Shake variation. I really enjoyed it. He goes through. Now he's in the Harlem Shake. Doom, 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 doom. He takes it and he goes. He connects it. Sends it out. Afterward, his leg position seems to indicate that he will turn to the left, but actually he turns to the right. Yep. God, I love that. That's just so fun. I love it. Both in full speed. Here we go. And boom. Da-da-da. Bum, bum. Boom. 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 Yes. These are things that keep battles interesting. Dancers find new ways instead of doing the same thing that we've already seen many times. But whenever you train choreography underneath somebody, that's how you build the fingerprints, is by doing the same thing that you've already seen many times, or in different subvariants, but hit the same texture and movement quality. That's how you get people's movement quality. That's why in a great case would be one of the dancers that is on Team Bebe. She trained under Bada. Every time she comes to Korea, she takes Bada's classes. That's why she looks like a mini Bada. Is because she's trained under the fingerprints of that mentor. Now, is she going to be able to branch off and be her own artist? That's up to her, and she's going to have to go through that crisis herself. You literally feel like you go through a midlife crisis when you want to be your own artist, but you feel stuck in imposter syndrome, or you feel like you can't be your own artist because you've just been gleaning from somebody else for so long, and you've never stopped to think to yourself. And I'm not saying that's the case in that case at all. I'm just saying that's an example that somebody could be in, where if you don't want to be known as a mini Bada, okay, where do you go from there? How do you make your own perspective? You know, like those are really tough things to answer for yourself, especially when you've never asked them at the inception, when you've already built up this movement quality, or you've built up this perspective. It's really hard to kind of audit that. It is, you know. Hyunse was less intricate and exciting, which is why so many disagreed with the choices. Now, I did talk about this. I did think he held his own here. I think for me, the issue with the battle wasn't the fact that he won over Ochan. I thought it was what it was. Also note too, I didn't see all of Ochan's battles, and Ochan was seen a lot more. Very similar in Wolflow's case, the more you're seen in a particular context. So here was SMF with similar judges, and we know the judges do not have quite as refined thinking to make appropriate calls when it comes to longevity of seeing people in multiple rounds. When your creative stamina gets tested, Ochan was operating more and more and more at a disadvantage every single time he had to go up and battle. That was just what it was. Wolflow, same thing. Baby Sleep, the exact same thing. You know, Baby Sleep held her own every freaking time, and it was so wonderful to see. And there was very rarely where I picked somebody else that she was against over her, but I had very good reasoning behind that. In this case, I would have picked Ochan, but I'm not as upset about him losing here as I was about Trix and J-Rock. That whole thing. Whew. But the reason why is because the justification of why Hyunse was selected over Ochan, I feel, could have been way better in articulation, because it goes back to, if a judge makes a call, justify it. That's why call-outs exist. At the Ways Within, like I had mentioned, Boogie Frantic, upon losing that round, he ends up during one of the ciphers in between, or top 16 to top 8, he does a call-out to one of the judges. And sometimes that mess happens. That's like real world battle stuff right there. Sometimes the most important battles are your call-outs over the tournament bracket, you know, because at a certain point, everybody's good. And you're just like, whoa, you know? So that's a complete side note. But all that's to say, like, I could disagree with it, you know. I really think they should have done a better job of expressing or justifying, but we all know how that went. So I'm not going to touch on it too much more because I really gave most of my spiel in my own analysis. J-Hope, in jam sessions practice time, it's normal to just explore a drill. It's a different environment from battles. Very different toolkit asked of you as well. It really is. It's very different. Wiggles talks about it a lot. Another Harlem Shake variation, I'd say. Yeah, I can understand that. Now I'll just go over some more aspects that dancers work on. Suitable for both beginner and advanced levels since there is no limit of working on them. Yeah, I would say that about bar work. So if you're somebody who takes ballet, bar work is one of the most integral parts of the process of class for me. Ballet class is structured so similarly across the board. It is wild. It is legit wild. It's awesome. However, you should be able to, and dancers go through this spurt when they were like preteens. They don't quite like really give their all. I actually cared more about ballet technique when I was an adult compared to when I was like 15, because a plie should make you not make you sweat, but it should make you work. Like even a plie, which is like the very first thing you do at the bar, is plies, port de bras, releves, dégagés. Tendus. Well, you do tendus first, and then you do dégagés, and then renajans, frappes, all this stuff at the bar because the bar is your partner, and then you go to center, or you go across the floor, you do various whatever. So there's a structure to the class. All that to say that drills or exploration or a lot of concepts and constructs, there are ways where you can always refine them, is what the point of this is, which I agree with. Experimenting with different accents, textures, and grooves. Yes, I agree with that. Nice little cane still walk there. I appreciated that. That was nice. I would also include switching up your music. So not dancing to music you're normally used to dancing to. For me, R&B, I don't dance to R&B near as much as I dance to contemporary styled music or music used in a contemporary styled class. That style I feel more familiar with. R&B I don't relate to as much because of, you know, just how I was nurtured, but I do appreciate the overall aesthetic of it, and, you know, and I vibe with it. I can vibe with it. But for dancing, I don't vibe with it as much as I do with other style tracks. And so a lot of times I was literally told by one of my mentors, he was like, you need to dance to R&B or dance to something other than what you're dancing to because you're restricting yourself in your, like, I was dancing too much in familiarity, so my movement couldn't branch out or have any sense of growth because I was so stuck up here. And so that's another thing I would add. Staying in flow while doing floor work. So switching up your dynamics when it comes to floor work versus upper body versus lower body. Very simple people footwork, but it looks good because of the flow. Yeah, so learning how to take movements or fundamentals and figuring out ways to get in and get out of them. Here with tutting, that's a great cinematography. Like, that's a great camera. I would hire him. Okay. Staying in the flow and expressing yourself instead of just learning a combo and using a battle. Yes, people are going to do this to you if they catch you doing something like that. Gorgeous. So he understands the basics of tutting. Like, the basic concept of tutting is you want to make sure that your angles make sense. How you connect them makes sense. Also, you're not just floating a tut in the air. It needs to have a sense of cohesiveness, you know, and how you bring it through, how you transition it into other positions, you know. You want it to actually feel collaborative and not combative. Love that. That's nice. Yeah, so nice. Soul. Harmony. Some also like to practice with objects. Yo, for me, props really play a huge role because they can open and branch up like a physicality instead of just imagining all of it. Water bottles because they can be brought into the battle. Yeah, that's true. You know, so like an example, something I've been told too is whenever you practice storytelling, it's like the world's your playground and your space is your playground. Explore with it. But for me, that was a really tricky concept for myself to explore in comparison to like Slim Boogie or Jay Smooth, because our upbringing is very different, and I think that's totally awesome when it comes to the collaborative perspectives that we all share. And whenever I was told to like be a playground, I have to imagine like this playground around me. Okay, I have this ball. What do I want to do with this ball? Okay, I'm done with the ball. Oh, there's a swing. How do I get into the swing? Okay, how do I want to swing into this? Is it a swing that's broken? You know, so you're like thinking through, and it actually allows you to stay present in what you're doing with your body instead of zoning out to just the music. So that's something that's helped me sometimes, but also if you don't know how to do that, using actual freaking prop is really helpful. If you're in a chair, you can definitely be like, okay, I'm stuck in the chair. What can I do here? You know, so it's learning how to critical think actually, is something that I didn't learn how to critical think until I was taking, when I was taking classes, like a professional certificate kind of classes, where that was part of I just had to learn how to critical think and think through things, not just get the answer because somebody told me to memorize this vocab word, right? Some dancers stand still while beat killing. So he actually is a really good innovator of locking. I've always really enjoyed JJ. He's very young, but I kudos to the teacher, because the teacher set him up in an environment to make him successful in exploring and finding his artistry at a young age. And honestly, pre-puberty is the best time to be able to do that, because they're such a sponge and their body is going to be more naturally receptive because it's not focusing on puberty. It's focusing on learning and gaining knowledge. And then eventually your body's going to transition to focusing on puberty, which is why you get a lot of teenagers feel set in their ways compared to like the 7 to 8 year olds. That's why, puberty. Because if they weren't going through puberty, they would be still a sponge. So that's something that I learned too from just child cognitive development. And it also is a whole thing with music too. We won't get into that. What is more difficult is to stay in the flow and groove while catching the other elements of the track. I agree with that. So maintaining flow, maintaining presence within the track. Yeah, I agree with that. Having patience, allowing your body to make choices as they see fit. In a battle, there is little time to understand the patterns in the music. For example, the bass line. So just a freestyle toolkit is very different than a choreography toolkit. Choreography, you have time. Freestyles, you don't. You have to be able to find it way faster. Choreography, that can come in handy when your teacher doesn't teach you where the steps go. You have to figure out where the movements go and match the musicality accordingly. You would be surprised at how many choreographers, especially because I like to ask questions in the class. And so sometimes I would ask that question as a musicality clarifying question, because it does determine how it comes across depending on what layer of the track that movement goes on. And a lot of them can't answer that question. So I know musicality is not being taught nearly as much in the studio realm, hence why they struggle with freestyle so much, because they don't even understand the intention between music and movement to begin with. And you need to be able to understand that in order to even know where to begin when it comes to exploring or being an artist. It's a really tricky thing. The concepts that complete beginners can experiment with, besides what's already been mentioned, concept illusion of manipulating different parts of the body with the hands. So like having these ideas is great, but that just goes back to like they make very valid points, but it goes back to the main thing of, because dancers aren't trained to critically think, they do not even know how to get to the place to ask themselves those questions. And I think that's something that I've had to grow in a lot and I've had to figure out for myself. So I know how to create the environment in my own classroom to even allow some sense of progression in that. Because I've struggled with it for years at this point. I can comfortably say years, plural. Or one arm or shoulder, head, leading, or even dragging through the body. Great ideas. They really are, you know? I used to be very caught up on trying to figure out so many different ways of being able to articulate methodology. But I just needed to have a mindset shift in general. Which style, concept, theme did you like the most? Is there something you disliked? This is very subjective and not everybody has the same taste. I wouldn't say it's 100% subjective. I would say that there's a sense of objectivity to it, because if it was 100% subjective, I would find way more holes in this, you know? It's when you just take a look at the overall like composition of how things are adjudicated in general, we have to have some sense of order, right? We can't have like, no, you can't just murder somebody because you want to, you know, like there's some sense of law and order to stuff. So naturally we can have a sense of law and order to adjudicating battles and adjudicating competitions. But remember, with battles, they used to not be, you know, oh, you win, you get a trophy. It used to be, gangs would battle, and that was a healthier, safer way for gangs to like go at it without shooting each other. You know, like the battles back in the day, very different than battles now. So that's a really big thing too. I hope that you can see how much time and dedication goes into the freestyle abilities of dancers like Lip J, Old Chan, or JJ who have battled at international events. Yes, I can agree with that. And they're all different. JJ has a more locking aesthetic. Ulchan has a more hip hop, and Lip J is more whacking. So notice they're in different, I like the fact that they are different in style. They're not all within the same style, which I like. So Facts and Fiction, you get a pass from me. I enjoyed this because I felt like we were able to talk about a lot of really interesting things, and there wasn't really anything that I disagreed with. It was more so I really felt like it was a really great point that I thought was really great way to elaborate off of, you know? So this was super fun. Yeah, I love this. Thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you, Facts and Fiction, for the recommendation of this video of yours. And I'm definitely excited to take a look at more of your stuff specifically because it's really fun, and I really feel that there's just more elaboration that can take place with a lot of the points that were made, and I really appreciate the points that were made because there wasn't a sense of discrediting whatsoever. It was just showing differences between things because for educational purposes, because a lot of people don't really know the differences of stuff, and that's why I really enjoy doing reactions and analysis, because I feel like the things that I'm really passionate about, I always try to figure out ways to where other people, if they want to know those things, they have a way to learn those things and be able to appreciate it the way they want to appreciate it, you know? Because that was my biggest thing growing up, was I always enjoyed things, but I didn't know why. So I had to look and find it for myself. And I know some people don't work like that. Some people don't know how to do that. And so that's why for me, I personally want to be a bridge to help with that in some way, shape, or form, whether that's in the K-pop realm, the D-League, Japanese, you know, Pro League realm, or the show realm, like Street Dance China, or just regular battles, things like that. And I know my scope is still very limited from life experience, from what I'm exposed to, as well as the things that are implicit versus explicit in my own training. I know that I'm going to be a lifelong learner, but it doesn't mean that I have to just gatekeep or not say anything until I think I know everything. No, I feel like I get to grow by having these verbal processing moments, like in this case, and I feel like I get to understand other people's perspectives in a different way, and I think this is really fun. If you want to see more content like this one, or K-pop, or anything that I've suggested, I have a lot of that on YouTube, but all of it gets early released, like this video, on Patreon. And there's always a lot of polls that take place, such as which video to react to from this channel, that kind of stuff. And I always love hearing from people who take a inkling to, or take a regular approach to wanting to view a lot of my content. I'm very thankful for it. And I always like to be a contributor to more content that is beneficial to people, which is why I do that. So anyway, I'm Jess, and I will catch you on the flip side. Bye.